So hello, everyone. I'm Lucia Leszinsky, coordinator of the Women in Translation Initiative by Pros.com. And today I have the pleasure of interviewing Chantal Wright, a renowned translator of French and German literary works into English, and founder of the Warwick Prize for Women in Translation, a 2017 initiative that appeared to address the gender imbalance in translated literature. And now, if I'm not mistaken, run by Professor Holly Longstaff. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Chantal remains deeply influential in the field, both as a translator and as an advocate for women in the industry. So I wanted to talk to her as part of the new Women in Translation initiative with the purpose of promoting women in the language industry and their amazing work in support of all of us. So with that being said, welcome, Chantal, and thank you for taking the time for this interview.
You're most welcome.
So I'm gonna get started with some of the questions that I have for you today. So as the founder of the Warwick Prize for Women in Translation, I've been reading around and I realized that it appeared to address the significant gender imbalance in the field. So can you tell me about the moment you realized that of this issue and that there was something needed, that you had to do something about it? And if you want, you can share some details about the prize itself, how it is structured, and the rules for those who are not familiar with it.
Yeah, sure. So I have to say first off that it was not my idea. I think as so often with initiatives that are about women and for women, it was a collaborative effort, and I just happened to be in a position where I could help it happen. So the general background was an article that appeared in Words Without Borders in May of 2013 by a translator called Alison Anderson, and that article was called "Where Are the Women in Translation?" and that kind of kick-started the whole thing. And then shortly after that, in 2014, we've got Women in Translation Month being founded by blogger and activist Chantal Wright, and that is the month that we are still in now. We're in 2024, so it's great that it's been going for all these years. And I'm amazed to see, you know, on the various emails that I subscribe to, just how important a month it's become. It's really something that publishers and journals have kind of signed up to and really promote, and that's all Chantal Wright's work. The specifics of the prize: so the prize is a British and Irish prize that's based at the University of Warwick. There had been a feeling, I think, among British, also among American and other English-speaking translators, that there was a problem with women in translation, that not enough women were being translated, and that not enough translated books by women were finding their way onto prize shortlists. And so there had been some informal meetings about this at on occasions like the London Book Fair, but also elsewhere. And there was a small group of women. I'm just going to name 3 of them, but there were more people involved: Katie Derbyshire, translator, now publisher; Joanna Walsh, author; and Rachel McNichol, translator, who in particular had agitated for this prize, who felt that there was a need for it. I think sorry, go ahead.
Did you know each other before that? You got together because you knew each other?
I knew Katie. I didn't know Rachel and Joanna, so it was kind of a case of being introduced to certain people through other people. Yeah, and I worked for the University of Warwick, and we thought there might be an opportunity, or, you know, having a partnership with the university might be a good way to go. And so in 2017, after knocking on several doors, I finally found a group of supportive people at the university: Alison Menzies, Maureen Freely, Simon Gilson, who said, yes, we can find some money to do this. Small scale, very modest. I feel it doesn't really matter. It was the gesture very much that counted. That's not to say that money isn't important, but I think in this case, the gesture was the important thing.
Yeah, and the echo that it's created over the years too. You can see, like 7 years afterwards, so almost 8 years afterwards, that we're still talking about it. I've been checking the website and the latest contestants and participation, and it's big. I mean, it's getting big. It's a great initiative. Now, given your academic background and your teaching experience, because I've seen you're also a teacher, how do you think translation studies have evolved over the years, particularly with the increasing focus on gender and diversity?
Yeah. So there was a lot of work done in the 1990s on translation and gender, interestingly enough, in Canada. So Louise von Flotoff and Sherry Simon, coming out of Ottawa and Montreal respectively, wrote two important books in the late 1990s. And then it kind of went quiet for a little while on the translation and gender front. And I would say that over the past 5 to 10 years, which of course, I think has to be seen against the background of the Me Too movement and other developments, there's been a resurgence of interest. But I would say that the focus now is very much not just on gender, but on intersectionality and diversity, and about bringing in underrepresented voices from communities and parts of the world that translation studies has ignored. So I think moving away from kind of Eurocentrism and a Western focus, and taking in really other voices, other languages, other places.
Luckily, yep, agree. Yeah, there's noise. One would think, when the noise started, it would be a couple of years, perhaps. We didn't know what would happen, and as you said, it continues. There's still a lot of noise around it, and people talking about it and trying to find new strategies and trying to overcome different challenges that appear over time. So yeah, in your experience, what are the most significant challenges women translators face today, and how can initiatives like the prize help overcome them?
I would say, I'm speaking specifically here about literary translation, which is the field that I work in. I mean, there's the long-term challenge of the fact that literary translation is very, very underpaid, very poorly compensated, and that is now, I think, well, it will be interesting to see how that plays out with the rise of AI, which I think has not yet been such an issue for literary translators, though clearly colleagues working in professional commercial translation have had to kind of engage with this for several years now. Literary translators are a little bit late to the game. So I think the challenge is to see how the rise of generative AI will play out in terms of working practices and compensation. And then I think the other big challenge to do with that has to do with copyright issues. Just to give an example, this is not necessarily translation related, but there was a big piece in the bookseller recently about how Taylor and Francis, who owns Routledge, which is a big publisher of translation titles, have essentially, sold their backlist, as it were, to Microsoft to feed Bean, essentially, without any compensation for authors or translators whose work was involved in those texts. So I think those are kind of the challenges for literary translation at the moment, combined with this, the long-standing fact of the practice being poorly paid.
Right. Yeah. That's a well-known issue. It's probably what most literary translators talk about and try to fight against. I haven't seen yet kind of like the solution. Maybe the appearance of AI brings something new to the game that allows literary translators to be better positioned to fight and get better rates, which I really hope that it happens. On a more personal note, what would you find most fulfilling about your work as a translator? What keeps you motivated after so many years in the field?
I think as a literary translator, you have, lots and lots of my colleagues would say it's the most intimate reading experience you can have. So you really spend a lot of time with somebody's work, and then you have to do something with it at the end of it. You don't just have a reading experience, you co-create the text. And I think that privilege of being able to step into somebody else's head and into the kind of architecture of a book, of a plot, of characters, and then to actually co-create that in a, you know, kind of bring it to life in another language. It's a tremendous privilege and a very fulfilling creative act. So I think on a practitioner front, that's what keeps me motivated. As a scholar, as an academic, I mean, the current moment of AI, it's challenging. It is, I think, can be perceived as a great threat, but it's also a really interesting moment to be thinking about language, translation. How is AI going to change our use of translation? Does it actually mean we have no need to translate anymore now that we have something like ChatGPT? So it's a moment of threat, but it's also a moment, I think, to philosophize a little bit about translation and language, and to see where that takes us.
Yeah, all of a sudden language, you know, is becoming the focus of attention, even of those groups out there who have never thought about language and translation and how certain works appear in the market in a different language. And now everyone's wondering about it, and where do these pieces of text come from, and the role of the translator, is it as important as we think, or are they invisible as some people think, you know, they are? I agree with you with the appearance of AI. There are a lot of questions who haven't been answered yet, and there's a lot of room for discussion, and see, you know, how we can turn it into an ally rather than an enemy, you know, in all this game. Have you had the chance to be in touch with any of the readers of the material you have translated into English, and share and see what their experience was of that reading?
Not so much. Sometimes I have talked, because I've translated quite a lot of children's literature, and I've talked to friends where I've maybe given them a copy of the book and they've read it with their child, and had a little bit kind of conversations with them, sometimes about age appropriateness. It's often an issue translating from German to English, that you know, I think the way the German speaking world conceives of childhood is quite different from the way, I say, the English speaking world. There are many English speaking worlds. Can't conflate kind of Britain, which is the context with which I'm most familiar with, say, an American or an Australian or a Canadian or an Indian childhood. So sometimes had conversations around that, and whether occasionally someone has said to me, I'm not sure that this book was entirely appropriate for my 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old. But on the whole, actually, I've had surprisingly few conversations, I think, about things that I've translated. And I think it's a little bit of a gap maybe in the way that we talk about translations, that we don't think enough about reader response and reception, and that we have often quite a cliched language to fall back on in terms of thinking about reviewing translations here. You know, the old chestnut, lost in translation. What does it actually mean? Nobody's quite sure. It's just one of those things that we pull out of the bag. So maybe that's something we could develop a bit more, actually, is, you know, reading translations and talking about our experience of reading them.
Now, what advice would you give to women aspiring to enter the field of literary translation or translation in general, especially those who might feel discouraged by possible gender imbalance?
I mean, I think where literary translation is concerned, my understanding is, I don't have a statistic in front of me, but it is a female-dominated profession. So I think there's not a problem entering the profession as a woman from that perspective. I think what puts people off is precisely the poor compensation, the need probably to combine something which is incredibly rewarding but pays very badly with something that allows you to exist above the breadline, and hopefully a little bit more above the breadline, you know, to pay the mortgage, to pay the bills. And I think something that students of translation and emerging translators very often hear from, you know, academics and mentors as well, you'll never make any money. Are you aware of the difficult path that you're setting out on? And I would just say, it's true, you won't get rich from it, but it is very rewarding, and it is, however, worth thinking about what else you will combine it with, both in economic terms, I think, but also just because I think I feel strongly as a woman, it's important, maybe as anybody, as you know, no matter the gender, it's important to have more than one string to your bow in life.
True, just in case. Just
Yeah.
in case. Yep, definitely. Yeah, I agree. I couldn't agree more. Okay, Chantal, it's been an absolute honor to speak with you today. Your work continues to inspire so many people, not just women in the translation industry. And I appreciate you taking the time to share your journey with us in this interview. You can check Chantal's work in your website. Is that correct? It's chantalwright.org.
Yes.
And there is a book. You've published a book entitled Literary Translation. I've seen it on Amazon. You can get it there. I guess some other places too. To be honest, I can't wait to read it. Now I feel curious. And if you would like to learn more about the Women in Translation initiative by Prose.com, I invite everyone to check Prose.com/Women in Translation for more information about this new initiative. Chantal, anything else you would like to share with the women out there watching you, and the men, and the entire language and translation community?
I'd just like to give another plug for the Warwick Prize for Women in Translation. So entries have closed for this year, but the prize will be awarded in the autumn. If you have any questions about it, contact Holly Langstaff at Warwick. She knows everything, and yeah, long may the prize continue.
Yes, definitely, and good luck to those who participated. We'll probably know when will those winners be announced?
It's usually November, around November.
Yep. We can share the announcement at Prose.com so that everyone can hear about it too. Thanks a lot again, Chantal. Hope you have a nice week, and thanks everyone for taking the time to watch this interview. See you around.
Bye-bye.